The hallways of Pine Grove High School echoed with laughter, but not the kind that warms your heart. For Priya, a 16-year-old junior with dreams bigger than her small town could hold, these echoes were daily reminders of being different. Her thick glasses, held together with clear tape at the bridge, slid down her nose as she hurried between classes, clutching her books close to her chest like a shield. "Hey, look, it's the walking dictionary," someone would shout, followed by snickers that bounced off the lockers. Priya kept her head down, pretending the words didn't sting. Her clothes, carefully selected from thrift stores by her hard-working mom, made her stand out among her classmates' brand-name outfits. But it wasn't the clothes that really bothered her. It was the loneliness that came with being different. Every lunch period, while others filled the cafeteria with chatter and gossip, Priya found refuge in the library's quietest corner. The librarian, Mrs. Kumar, would give her a gentle smile, understanding without words. Between bites of her home-packed lunch, Priya would lose herself in advanced chemistry problems, finding comfort in equations that always made sense, unlike the social equations of high school life. At home, things were different. Their small apartment might not have been much, but it was filled with love and the smell of her mom's cooking. "Beta, you're going to change the world someday," her mom would say while stirring dinner, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her double shift. These words were like warm blankets on cold days, wrapping Priya in hope. One particularly rough day, after someone had accidentally knocked her science project off her desk, Priya found herself crying in the bathroom during third period. As tears rolled down her cheeks, she pulled out her notebook, not to write about her sadness, but to work on the complex chemical reactions she'd been studying. Even through tears, the formulas danced in her mind, offering an escape. Her teachers noticed her brilliance, but most kept their distance, unsure how to bridge the gap between her and her classmates. Mr. Rodriguez, her chemistry teacher, would occasionally leave interesting articles on her desk, little breadcrumbs of encouragement that made her feel less alone in her passion for science. The nickname Library Ghost started when someone noticed she spent every free period among the books. It spread like wildfire, but Priya decided to own it. "At least ghosts are remembered," she wrote in her diary one night, trying to find humor in her situation. Despite maintaining perfect grades, each small victory felt hollow without anyone to share it with. Sure, her mom would beam with pride, putting every test paper on their fridge, but Priya yearned for just one friend who would understand her excitement about solving a particularly tricky physics problem. But life had a way of preparing her for something bigger. All those lonely hours studying, all the tears wiped away in bathroom stalls, all the moments of feeling like an outsider, they were silently building something in her. Like a caterpillar in its chrysalis, Priya was transforming, though she didn't know it yet. One thing kept her going, her dream of becoming a scientist who could make a difference. Every night, before falling asleep, she would look at the poster of famous women scientists on her wall and whisper, "Someday." Little did she know, someday was coming sooner than she thought, and all those hours spent being the library ghost were about to pay off in ways she never imagined. It started as just another Tuesday at Pine Grove High. Priya was rushing to the science lab, arms full of books and papers, trying to avoid the usual shoulder bumps and whispered comments. The halls were extra crowded because of a special assembly about careers in science, something that would normally excite her, but today she just wanted to become invisible. As she pushed open the lab door with her elbow, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Her foot caught on the doorframe, and suddenly her perfectly organized notes were flying everywhere. She stumbled forward, knocking into one of the display tables. Glass beakers crashed to the floor, creating a symphony of shattering that seemed to echo forever. The laughter started immediately. Typical library ghost, destroying everything she touches. Someone called out. Priya felt her cheeks burn as she dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather her scattered papers before they got stepped on. That's when a different kind of silence fell over the room. A tall woman in a crisp lab coat knelt beside Priya, helping her collect the papers. "These are fascinating notes," the woman said, her eyes scanning the detailed chemical equations Priya had written. "Is this an alternative approach to the standard oxidation process?" The woman introduced herself as Dr. Patel, a visiting scientist from the National Research Institute. While other students shuffled to their seats, still snickering, Dr. Patel continued to look through Priya's notes with genuine interest. "You've identified a pattern here that many of my colleagues missed," she said, pointing to a particular sequence of reactions. During the assembly, instead of sitting with her usual empty seats around her, Priya found herself next to Dr. Patel in the back of the auditorium. As other scientists spoke about their work, Dr. Patel quietly pointed out connections to Priya's own theories scribbled in her notebooks. After the assembly, when everyone else had left, Dr. Patel made an offer that would change everything. "We're working on some interesting projects at the university lab," she said, adjusting her glasses. "We could use a fresh perspective, someone who sees things differently." Priya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But I'm just a high school student," she stammered, clutching her recovered notes to her chest. "Age is just a number," Dr. Patel smiled. "Curiosity and dedication. That's what matters in science. I see both in you." That evening, Priya's mom listened with tears in her eyes as her daughter excitedly explained the opportunity. "See? I always told you your hard work would open doors," she said, hugging Priya tightly. The next day at school felt different. The same people tried to trip her in the hallway, the same whispers followed her, but they seemed to bounce off an invisible shield of hope. During lunch, instead of hiding in the library, she sat in Mr. Rodriguez's classroom, filling out the required forms for the lab program. "You know this won't be easy," Mr. Rodriguez said, signing his recommendation letter. "Working in a real lab while keeping up with your studies." Priya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Nothing in my life has been easy, sir. But this feels right." As she walked home that afternoon, her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patel. "Lab coat ready for tomorrow. Don't forget to bring that brilliant mind of yours." For the first time in years, Priya didn't rush straight home to study. Instead, she took a detour through the park, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Her mind was already racing with ideas, questions, and possibilities. The whispers and last at school suddenly seemed so small compared to what lay ahead. That night, as she laid out her clothes for the next day, Priya caught her reflection in the mirror. The same thick glasses, the same second-hand clothes, but something was different. There was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another day of surviving. It would be her first day of truly living. The university lab was nothing like the school's science room. Instead of worn-out posters and basic equipment, gleaming machines hummed with purpose, and computer screens displayed complex data that made Priya's heart race with excitement. During her first week, she stayed quiet, absorbing everything like a sponge, watching how the research team worked together. Dr. Patel had given her a small desk near the water purification station. "Start by observing," she'd said. "Sometimes the best ideas come from just watching." Priya took those words to heart, filling her new notebook with observations others might have missed. She noticed how the current filtration system wasted energy during certain cycles, and how some materials seemed to work better at different temperatures. But school was still school. Playing scientist after class. One classmate sneered when they spotted her rushing out with her lab coat carefully folded in her backpack. "Maybe she's really working at a dry cleaner," another added, leading to eruptions of laughter. Priya kept walking, her mind already on the breakthrough she felt was just within reach. One evening, while everyone else had gone home, Priya stayed behind, staring at the water samples through a microscope. Something wasn't adding up in the current purification method. She grabbed her notebook, flipping through weeks of observations. That's when it hit her. What if they were approaching the problem from the wrong angle? Dr. Patel. She called out the next morning, nearly tripping over her words with excitement. What if we adjust the filtration sequence? Look at these patterns I noticed. She spread out her notes, hands shaking slightly as she explained her theory. The whole lab gathered around, faces shifting from curiosity to surprise as they followed her reasoning. This is remarkable, Dr. Patel whispered, studying the diagrams. How did we miss this? She turned to Priya, beaming. We need to run some tests immediately. For the next few weeks, Priya felt like she was living in two different worlds. In one, she was still the quiet girl at school, dodging paper balls and ignoring whispers. But in the lab, she was alive, respected, her ideas taken seriously. When the first test results came back positive, showing a 40% increase in efficiency, the entire research team celebrated. Where do you really go after school? Her old lunch table neighbor asked one day, curiosity finally overcoming meanness. I heard you talking about water filtration systems with Mr. Rodriguez. I work at the university lab, Priya replied simply, gathering her books. We're developing a new way to clean water. The look of disbelief on her classmate's face almost made her laugh. The rumors started spreading. She was making it all up. She was trying to sound important. Nobody believed that the library ghost could be doing real scientific research. One day, she overheard someone saying she probably just cleaned test tubes. But Priya had stopped caring about their opinions. Her mom had posted her first official research credit on their fridge, right next to the takeout menus. My daughter, the scientist, she'd say proudly to anyone who would listen. Late one night, as she reviewed the latest test results with Dr. Patel, her mentor said something that stuck with her. You know what makes a true scientist? Not just intelligence, but the ability to see what everyone else has been looking at differently. You have that gift. Those words gave her strength when the whispers at school got louder. Let them talk, she thought. The numbers didn't lie, and her results were speaking volumes. The water purification system was becoming more efficient every day, and big companies were starting to take notice. Walking home that evening, Priya passed by her old hideout in the library. Mrs. Kumar waved through the window, holding up the latest scientific journal where the preliminary findings had been mentioned. The library ghost was becoming the laboratory pioneer, whether her classmates believed it or not. That night, updating her research journal, Priya realized something important. Those years of feeling invisible hadn't broken her. They'd given her the perfect training for a scientist. While everyone else was busy following the crowd, she'd learned to observe, to think differently, to see what others missed. Her biggest weakness had become her greatest strength. The morning news hit like a thunderbolt. Breaking. Local water supply shows dangerous contamination levels. Priya almost dropped her toast when she saw the report. The city's main water treatment facility had detected unusual pollutants that their current systems couldn't handle. Her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Patel. Emergency meeting at the lab. Your research might be more important than we thought. The lab was chaos when she arrived. Scientists rushed between stations, phones rang constantly, and worried faces huddled around computer screens. Dr. Patel stood in the center, trying to coordinate everything. Our new filtration method, Dr. Patel announced to the crowded room, might be our best shot at solving this crisis. And the person who knows it best is right here. All eyes turned to Priya, who suddenly felt very small in her oversized lab coat. Me? She squeaked. But I'm just a high school student. A high school student who developed a breakthrough in water purification, Dr. Patel corrected. The city council wants a presentation on possible solutions tomorrow morning. They need to know all their options. Priya's stomach turned to ice. Public speaking. She could barely answer questions in class without her voice shaking. I can't, she whispered. Nobody will take me seriously. Her mom found her that evening, curled up in their tiny living room, surrounded by research papers. Beta, she said softly, sitting beside her. Remember when you were little and afraid of the dark? What did we do? We turned on one light at a time, Priya replied, smiling at the memory. This is just another dark room. Take it one light at a time. She stayed up all night, practicing her presentation in front of their bathroom mirror. Each time she stumbled, she started again. Her mom kept bringing her cups of chai, saying, "One more time, Beta. One more time." The next morning, the city hall looked enormous. News vans crowded the parking lot, and reporters clutched their microphones, waiting for updates. Inside, the council chamber was packed. Priya spotted her classmates in the audience. Their science teacher had brought them to watch. Her hands trembled as she set up her laptop. Then she saw her mom in the back row, giving her a thumbs up. Dr. Patel sat in the front, nodding encouragingly. One light at a time, she thought. "Good morning," she began, her voice barely a whisper. Someone coughed. Another person shuffled papers. She took a deep breath and thought of all the nights in the lab, all the discoveries, all the times she'd been right when others doubted. "Our city has a problem," she started again, stronger this time. "But we also have a solution." Her voice grew steadier as she explained her research. The graphs and data she'd stared at for months now told the story everyone needed to hear. Questions came rapid fire from council members and environmental experts. With each answer, Priya felt more confident. This was her world, the world of science, of solutions, of making things better. The same classmates who'd called her library ghost watched open-mouthed as she handled complex technical questions with ease. Local news cameras rolled as she demonstrated how her filtration method worked. And the best part, she concluded, is that we can implement this system using mostly existing infrastructure. We can start today. The council chamber erupted in applause. Dr. Patel was beaming. Reporters surrounded her, asking for interviews. Even her classmates looked stunned, especially when the mayor shook her hand, calling her the kind of bright mind our city needs. But the sweetest moment came later that evening. As she helped her mom prepare dinner, they watched the news coverage together. And the solution to our city's water crisis may come from an unexpected source. The reporter said, a local high school student whose innovative research could change everything. Her mom paused the TV, tears in her eyes. "See, the dark room isn't so scary anymore, is it?" Priya looked at her phone, filling up with messages from people who'd never spoken to her before. Tomorrow at school would be different, she knew. But for the first time, she was ready for different. She'd found her light, and it was bright enough to help others find their way too. Walking into school, the next day felt like entering a different universe. The usual whispers followed Priya down the hallway, but they weren't the same anymore. "That's her, the one from the news. Did you see her on TV? I can't believe she actually invented something." Her locker, once a lonely corner where she'd hide between classes, now had a small crowd around it. The principal had posted a newspaper clipping about her water filtration breakthrough on the school bulletin board. Even her old tormentors seemed unsure how to act around the girl they'd nicknamed Library Ghost. But fame wasn't what Priya had been working for. During lunch, she still went to the library, not to hide anymore, but because she had real work to do. The water treatment facility was implementing her system, and she had calculations to double-check. That's when something unexpected happened. A freshman girl approached her table timidly. I saw you on the news," she said, clutching her books. I love science too, but everyone makes fun of me for it." Her eyes were filled with the same loneliness Priya knew too well. "Pull up a chair," Priya said, moving her papers aside. "Want to see something cool?" She showed the girl her latest research notes, explaining how she'd come up with her ideas. Soon, another student joined them, then another. By the end of lunch, their table had become a tiny science club. Dr. Patel noticed the change too. "You're different," she said one afternoon in the lab, more confident. Priya was explaining her work to a group of visiting scientists, no longer the shy girl who could barely look up from her notes. But not everything had changed. Some students still rolled their eyes when she raised her hand in class. A few whispered that she must have stolen her ideas from somewhere. Instead of letting it hurt her, Priya channeled that energy into something bigger. She approached the principal with an idea. "We need a STEM mentorship program," she explained. "Not just for the top students, but for anyone who feels different because they love science. Especially in the underfunded schools across town." The local newspaper caught wind of her initiative. "Teen scientist gives back," read the headline. But what really touched Priya was the flood of emails from students all over the city. "I thought I was the only one," they wrote. "You showed me it's okay to be different." One day, she found a small group of her former bullies waiting by her locker. She braced herself, but their leader just shuffled awkwardly. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "And, well, my little sister wants to be a scientist now. Because of you." Priya could have enjoyed watching them squirm. Instead, she smiled. "The science club meets on Thursdays. Your sister's welcome to join. You all are." The transformation wasn't just at school. The city's water treatment facility had successfully implemented her filtration system. Engineers from other cities started calling, wanting to learn more. Dr. Patel helped her apply for patents, making sure Priya's innovation would be protected and properly credited. Her mom still worked the same long hours at the hospital, but now she kept a folder of newspaper clippings about her daughter. "See," she'd tell her patients proudly, "dreams don't care where you come from. They care where you're going." Late one evening, as Priya worked on plans for the mentorship program, she found her old diary. The pages were filled with tears and loneliness, dreams that seemed impossible back then. She added a new entry. "Sometimes the world isn't ready for who you are. Don't change. Let them catch up." The library was still her favorite place, but now she wasn't alone there. Regular study groups formed around her table, where questions were welcome, and no one was judged for being too smart. Mrs. Kumar, the librarian, had to enforce the noise rule for the first time in years, not because of teasing, but because of excited scientific discussions. Priya kept her old glasses, even though she could afford new ones now. They reminded her of where she came from, and more importantly, they might help another student recognize themselves in her story. After all, every great transformation starts with someone being brave enough to be different. The science club room buzzed with energy every Thursday afternoon. What started as a handful of curious students had grown into something beautiful. Kids from all grades filled the tables, working on projects, sharing ideas, and most importantly, finding their place to belong. Priya stood at the front of the room, helping a group of freshmen with their water quality testing project. "Remember," she said, adjusting a microscope, "sometimes the most important discoveries come from the questions nobody else thinks to ask." The door creaked open, and a familiar face peeked in. One of her old tormentors, now bringing her younger sister to the club. The little girl's eyes sparkled with curiosity, reminding Priya of herself at that age. "Can we really do any experiment we want?" The young girl asked, clutching her notebook. "As long as it's safe and Dr. Patel approves it," Priya smiled. She'd arranged for her mentor to visit the club monthly, bringing university-level equipment and expertise. The partnership had transformed their underfunded school science program into something extraordinary. During one session, a quiet boy raised his hand. "Everyone at home says science is a waste of time," he admitted, voice trembling. "They say I should focus on something more practical." The room fell silent. Priya felt the weight of every scared, doubting student's eyes on her. "Let me tell you a story," she began, perching on the edge of a desk. She told them about the lonely days in the library, the mockery, the tears wiped away in bathroom stalls. But then she told them about the breakthrough, the city council presentation, and most importantly, about finding her tribe. "Being different isn't a weakness," she said, looking at each student in turn. It's your superpower. My mom always says that people who fit in everywhere never make a difference anywhere. Word spread about the club's success. Other schools started asking how they could create similar programs. Priya worked with Dr. Patel to develop a guide, making sure it would work even for schools with limited resources. We're not just teaching science, she explained during a district meeting. We're building a community where curiosity is celebrated. The transformation in her former bullies was perhaps the most surprising part. Many now volunteered at the club, helping with experiments and encouraging younger students. We were scared of what we didn't understand, one admitted while helping set up a chemistry demonstration. You showed us there was nothing to fear. One rainy afternoon, Priya found herself back in the library during lunch. Not to hide, but to mentor a freshman who reminded her so much of herself. As they worked through complex equations, Mrs. Kumar walked by, smiling at the full tables around them. The library had become a buzzing hub of study groups and science discussions. You know what the best part is? The freshman whispered, looking up from her work. I don't feel alone anymore. Those words hit home. Priya remembered all too well how isolation had felt, how the weight of being different had pressed down on her shoulders. Now, looking around the library, she saw dozens of students who once might have hidden their talents, proudly sharing their knowledge instead. The school paper ran a story about the science club's impact. From outcasts to innovation leaders, the headline read. But what really mattered weren't the headlines or the accolades. It was the quiet moments of connection, the light in a student's eyes when they finally understood a concept, the friendships forming over shared curiosity. During the club's end-of-year ceremony, students presented their projects to the community. Parents, teachers, and local scientists filled the auditorium. Projects ranged from alternative energy solutions to new recycling methods, each inspired by real-world problems. This is more than a club, Priya told the audience. This is proof that when we create spaces where everyone belongs, amazing things happen. Later that evening, cleaning up the science room, Priya found a note left on her desk. Thank you for making it okay to be smart, it read. Thank you for showing us we're not alone. She pinned the note to the club's bulletin board, right next to the article about her water filtration system. The library ghost nickname had evolved into something unexpected. A reminder that sometimes the very things that make us feel invisible can end up making us unforgettable. 5 years had passed, but walking through Pine Grove High School's doors still brought back a flood of memories. The hallways seemed smaller now, the lockers less intimidating. Posters advertising the annual science fair covered the walls. A tradition that had started with that first small science club. Today was special. The school had invited Priya back as a guest speaker, but she'd arrived early to take it all in. Her old locker still had a small dent where someone had once kicked it. Now it bore a small plaque. Dream big, think different, the science club's motto. The library looked different too. Gone was the dusty corner where she used to hide. Instead, study pods filled the space, each named after famous scientists. Students gathered around tables, openly sharing their passion for learning. Mrs. Kumar, now with a few more gray hairs, still watched over it all with a gentle smile. Can you believe it? The principal asked, walking with her toward the auditorium. We've had 3 students accepted to top research programs this year. All of them say they were inspired by your story. He pointed to a display case filled with science fair trophies and newspaper clippings. In the center was the article about her water filtration system, now slightly yellowed with age. The auditorium was packed. Students filled every seat, some sitting in the aisles. Through the stage curtain, Priya could see her mom in the front row, still wearing her nurse's scrubs. She'd come straight from her shift. Dr. Patel sat beside her, both women beaming with pride. As Priya stepped onto the stage, the applause felt different from that first nervous presentation at City Hall. She wasn't just the girl who'd solved a water crisis anymore. She was living proof that being different could change the world. 5 years ago, she began, I stood in this school feeling invisible. They called me the library ghost. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the best things in life grow from the moments when we feel most alone. She told them about her journey, the patents she now held, the research teams she led, the international conferences where she shared her innovations. But more importantly, she told them about the letters she received from students around the world who'd found courage in her story. But success isn't just about proving others wrong, she continued. It's about proving yourself right, and then holding the door open for others to follow. The science club she'd started had spread to 30 other schools. The mentorship program had helped hundreds of students find their path. But what made her proudest was seeing former bullies become advocates for inclusive education. During the question and answer session, a small girl raised her hand. Did you ever want to give up? She asked softly. Priya smiled, remembering countless tears and doubts. Every day. But giving up would have meant letting fear win. And fear is just another problem waiting for a solution. After the speech, students crowded around her. Some showed her their research projects, others just wanted to share their dreams. One boy hung back until the crowd thinned. I got called names today, he admitted, for loving math. Want to know a secret? Priya leaned in. Those names? They're just labels people put on things they don't understand. And the great thing about labels is, we can change them. Later, walking through the school one last time, she passed the science lab. Inside, a group of students worked on experiments, their excited voices carrying into the hallway. On the wall hung a photo of that first science club meeting, next to pictures of recent graduates heading off to prestigious research programs. In the parking lot, her mom waited with Dr. Patel. Ready to go? They asked. Priya looked back at the school, remembering the scared girl she'd been. The library ghost had become so much more. A scientist, a mentor, a symbol of change. You know, she said, I used to think success meant proving everyone wrong. But it's really about proving that everyone has the potential to be right, about themselves, about others, about what's possible. As they drove away, she spotted a girl in thick glasses hurrying into the library, arms full of books. But unlike years ago, this girl walked with her head held high, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. The ghost story had become a legacy of hope.